All right, if you have your Bibles, I invite your attention to Job chapter 38. My wife and the young people are being dismissed at this time. I don't know if you've ever encountered someone who has went through some difficult times. I've encountered people who, they're going through struggles, they have some tough situations in their life, and one of the first things they want to do is blame it on God. God abandoned me, God doesn't care about me, God allowed this to happen, and God's just so terrible. If God was a good, loving God, He shouldn't have allowed these terrible circumstances to happen in my life. And what they are in effect doing, they are standing in judgment of an infinite God with their limited amount of knowledge and their limited amount of years. They're standing there in judgment of our eternal God. Well, Job, in our passage this morning, well, not in our passage, but prior to that, he experienced quite a bit of difficulties. If you've ever read through the book of Job, if anyone could have complained, Job could probably complain. He lost all of his family in one day. He lost all of his livestock in one day. He lost everything. Everything that this world has to offer, materially speaking, he lost. And yet he was still just. He had not sinned. He had not done no wrong. Yet all these things were happening to Job. And Job didn't understand why these things were taking place. He had friends come along and said, well, surely, Job, you must have sinned. You must have done something. He had his wife standing there saying, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? In our passage this morning, and I don't even know if I'm going to call it a sermon because we're going to read an awful lot of scripture this morning. But I was researching through the book of Job, and I've seen where there's over 300 questions in the book of Job. I believe it's more than any other book in the Bible. But in our passage this morning, we'll see God asking a series of questions to Job. A lot of them is rhetorical questions. God knows that Job wasn't there when the oceans were carved out. God knows that Job wasn't there when different species were created. And God knows that Job doesn't know a lot of these things, where snow comes from or where the lightning bolts come from. But yet God asked Job all these questions. Chapter 38, we'll start at verse 1. It says, Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and thick darkness and swaddling band for it, and brake up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors, and said, Hitherto thou shalt come, but no farther, and here shall thy proud waves be stayed. Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dayspring to know his place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it? It is turned as clay to the seal, and they stand as a garment. And from the wicked their light is withholden, and the high arm shall be broken. Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea, or hast thou walked in the search of the depth? Have the gates of death been opened unto thee, or hast thou seen the doors of the shadow of death? Hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare if thou knowest it all. Where is the way where light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? That thou shouldest take it to the bound thereof, and that thou shouldest know the paths to the house thereof. Knowest thou it, because thou wast then born, or because the number of thy days is great? We see God asking Job a series of questions that God knows full well that Job has no answer for. There would be no way that Job was there or could understand some of the things that the Lord is speaking of. but it shows the awesome power of God in creation. He laid the foundations of the earth. He shut up the seas. He talks about light and darkness. He talks about the gates of death. God knows that Job can only stand in awe because he's but a finite man. He's not an infinite God. He wasn't there when these things transpired. Look at verse 21. Do you know because you were born when these things took place? God there again asks another rhetorical question. He knows that Job wasn't born when these things took place. But he's showing Job that God is above him, that God is bigger than him, that God is the one that in his might and in his power, he's the one that caused all these things to take place. Verse 22, he goes on and says, hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow? Or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war? By what way the light is the light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? Who hath divided a watercourse for the overflowing of waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder? To cause it to rain on the earth where no man is, on the wilderness wherein there is no man. To satisfy the desolate and waste ground, and to cause the bud of the tender herb to spring forth. Hath the rain a father, or who hath begotten the drops of dew? Out of whose womb came the ice, and the hoary frost of heaven? Who hath gendered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season? Or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? Canst thou lift up the voice to the clouds, that abundance of waters may cover thee? Canst thou send lightnings, that they may go, and say unto thee, here we are? Here in verses 22 through 35, we see God asking Job questions pertaining to nature, the snow, the hail, the lightning, the thunder. And here again, God asks Job rhetorical questions, knowing that Job knows nothing about making it rain. Job knows nothing about where the snow comes from. But I'm sure that he, like we, just marveled at the power of God. If you've ever been in a lightning storm, and you hear that crack of thunder, and you see that bolt of lightning, you jump and you just stand back, and you're just filled with amazement and wonder at how mighty God must be. If you've ever seen a large tree that it will take several minutes with a really good chainsaw to cut down, one nice bolt of lightning can snap it in a fraction of a second. That's the might and the power of the God that we serve. We see God's awesome power in nature. In verse 36, who hath put wisdom in the inward parts, or who hath given understanding to the heart? Who can number the clouds in wisdom, or who can stay the bottles of heaven? When the dust groweth into darkness, and the clouds cleave fast together, wilt thou hunt the prey for the lion, or fill the appetite of the young lions, when they crouch in their dens and abide in the covert to lie in wait? Who provideth for the raven his food? When his young ones cry unto God, they wander for lack of meat. Knowest thou the time when the wild goats of the rock bring forth? Or canst thou mark when the hinds do calve? Canst thou number the months that they fulfill? Or knowest thou the time when they bring forth? They bow themselves, they bring forth their young ones, they cast out their sorrows. Their young ones are in good liking, they grow up with corn, they go forth and return not unto them. Who hath set out the wild ass free? Or who hath loosed the bands of the wild ass? Whose house I have made the wilderness, and the barren land his dwellings. He scorneth the multitude of the city, neither regardeth he the crying of the driver. The range of the mountains is his pasture, and he searcheth after every green thing. Will the unicorn be willing to serve thee, or abide by thy crib? Canst thou bind the unicorn with his band in the furrow? Or will he harrow in the valleys after thee? Wilt thou trust him because his strength is great, or wilt thou leave thy labor to him? Wilt thou believe him that he will bring home seed and gather it into thy barn? Gavest thou the goodly wings unto the peacocks, or wings and feathers unto the ostrich? which leaveth her eggs in the earth, and warmeth them in dust, and forgetteth that the food may crush them, or that the wild beast may break them. She is hardened against her young ones, as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without fear, because God hath deprived her of wisdom, neither hath he imparted her understanding. What time she lifteth up herself on high, she scorneth the horse and his rider. Hast thou given the horse strength? Hast thou clothed his neck with thunder? Canst thou make him afraid as a grasshopper? The glory of his nostrils is terrible. He paweth in the valley, and rejoiceth in his strength. He goeth on to meet the armed men. He mocketh at fear, and is not affrighted, neither turneth he back from the sword. The quiver rattleth against him, the glittering spear and shield. He swalloweth the ground with fierceness and rage, neither believeth he that it is the sound of the trumpet. He saith among the trumpets, Ha ha, and he smelleth the battle afar off, the thunder of the captains and the shouting. Doth the hawk fly by thy wisdom, and stretch her wings toward the south? Doth the eagle mount up at thy command, and make her nest on high? She dwelleth and abideth at the rock, upon the crag of the rock, and the strong place. From thence she seeketh the prey, and her eyes behold afar off. Her young ones also suck up blood, and where the slain are, there she is. Although God is a mighty God, we see in these passages here, these last verses that we read, that he cares for his creation, that he takes care of wildlife, that he has instilled within them the knowledge and the ability to survive, to find their food. He's the one that helps the lions to hunt their prey, and he gives them the ability to seek after their food and to care for their young. And there again, he's asking Job all these questions. Are you the one that instills wisdom into the lion so that he can hunt his prey? Are you the one that's given the peacocks their feathers? Are you the one that enables these birds to fly? We see that God is the one that cares for nature. He's the one that has instilled in them all these instincts and abilities. Verse 1 in chapter 40, it says, Moreover the Lord answered Job and said, Shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? He that reproveth God, let him answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? I will lay mine hand upon my mouth. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yea, twice, but I will proceed no further. Then answered the Lord unto Job out of the whirlwind, and said, Gird up thy loins like a man. I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. Wilt thou also disannul my judgment? Wilt thou condemn me, that thou mayest be righteous? That's what many people do today.